Highway 287 was a ribbon of ice cutting through the Wyoming plains. Midnight, no stars, no moon, just wind, and the kind of cold that made your bones forget they were ever warm. Ruby Clark hadn't planned on driving tonight, but 3 nights before Christmas, some ghosts don't leave you alone. Her old truck rattled with every gust, heater groaning, radio dead. She didn't mind the silence. After 3 years of it was almost a friend. She was 61, widowed, semi-retired wildlife officer. She'd buried her husband a decade ago and her only son 3 winters back. Since then, life had narrowed to a cabin, 2 bookshelves, and a heart too full of ache to be useful anymore. She almost missed it. A dark blur against the snow, barely a shape, moving wrong. Her boot slammed the brake. The truck skidded sideways before coming to a slow, creaking stop. The headlights caught him. A German shepherd, enormous even in pain. He was dragging himself across the snow, front legs pulling, hind legs lifeless behind him. Every movement carved a red streak across the ice. The blood was fresh, the effort desperate. Ruby's breath caught, not from the cold, from something deeper, a recognition of suffering, of silence, of something trying to live when it had every right to die. She opened the door. The wind roared like it wanted her gone, but she moved forward. Snow slapped her face. Her boots sank. Her knees buckled when she hit the ground beside him. He didn't growl, didn't whimper. He just looked at her. Amber eyes, glazed with pain, still clear enough to see her and trust her. She reached out slowly, palm up. He didn't move, but his tail thumped once, more memory than muscle. Ruby's chest tightened. His fur was wet, caked with blood, ice, and something darker. His paws were raw. The back legs, useless, one bent wrong, both swollen black at the toes. He smelled like days of infection and snow rot. He was dying, but still moving. She leaned in, whispering low. "Hey there, you picked a hell of a place to die." And then she saw the tag, frozen to his collar. She snapped her glove off, fingertips already numb, scraped the frost away. One line, "Bear. If found, please keep him. He deserves better." No name, no plea, no request to call, just one truth. He deserved better. Ruby closed her eyes. This wasn't a stray. Someone had named him, loved him, then left him. "Bear," she said aloud. His ears twitched. He knew. The wind howled louder, as if testing her. She tried to lift him. The weight hit her hard. He was too big. She was too old. It didn't matter. She gritted her teeth, wedged her arms under his chest, and lifted. He didn't resist. He didn't help either. He just let her try. Halfway back to the truck, her knees gave out. They both fell. The snow cushioned the impact, but not the pain. Ruby gasped, arms trembling, breath white in the air. Bear's head turned toward her, his eyes patient, almost apologetic. "I'm trying," she choked out. "I swear I'm trying." In her mind, she heard her son's voice again. "Mom, you can't leave him. You know that." Jake had said the same thing about a dying fox on the roadside, about a lost hiker with a broken ankle, about everything. "We help, Mom. That's who we are." But Jake was gone, and this dog was going too. No, not tonight. She pulled again. Somehow she made it. The truck's passenger door creaked open. She laid him across the back seat, wrapped him in the old army blanket, started the engine, cranked the heat. His breathing was shallow. His body temperature was plummeting. She called every emergency vet clinic within 50 miles. Only one answered, a young voice. "We're on skeleton crew. One doctor, you need to come now." She drove. The wind screamed. The truck groaned. Bear didn't make a sound. She kept checking the rear view, kept whispering his name. He blinked at her once, just once. At the clinic, The vet tech was already waiting outside in scrubs and a parka. They rushed Bear in without a gurney. Inside, the lights were too bright, the warmth too sudden. The vet was an older man, silver hair, stiff shoulders. He introduced himself as Dr. Harris. He looked at Bear for 10 seconds and went cold. "How long's he been like this?" "I found him an hour ago, crawling on the highway." Dr. Harris was already moving. "We need fluids, warming pads, IV antibiotics, stat." Ruby stood frozen by the door. One tech wrapped Bear in thermal foil. Another inserted a line. Dr. Harris stared at the X-ray. "Spinal compression, lower lumbar. Looks like a vehicle strike. Maybe days old." He turned to Ruby. "He's paralyzed from the waist down. Maybe permanently." She nodded. "There's a chance." The doctor added. She nodded again. "Treatment will be expensive." "I didn't ask." Harris studied her. "I'm telling you so you understand. This might not end well." She stepped forward, knelt beside Bear. His eyes found hers. "I'm not leaving him," she said. "Do what you can. I'll find a way to pay." The doctor didn't argue. 3 hours later, Bear was stable, not safe, not healed, but breathing, warm. Ruby sat beside his crate, hands trembling, heart louder than her thoughts. And for the first time in 3 years, she cried. Not from grief, from something scarier. Hope. The vet clinic was quiet at 3 a.m., just the hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional beep from machines, and Bear's shallow breaths echoing in the recovery room. Dr. Harris stood at the glass window beside Ruby, arms crossed, eyes focused. "He's stable, for now," he said. Ruby nodded but didn't move. Her fingers curled tight around the edges of her coat. The snow still clung to her boots, melting into small, muddy pools on the linoleum. "How bad?" she asked. Dr. Harris exhaled, long and low. "Spinal trauma at L4 to L6, complete paralysis in the rear limbs, some internal bruising. The frostbite on his paws is advanced, but treatable. Infections in multiple pressure wounds." He paused. This dog shouldn't be alive. "But he is." "Yeah," Harris admitted. "He is." She turned her head slightly, eyes locked on the metal cage where Bear lay. Wrapped in warming blankets, an IV line taped to his leg, his breathing steady now. His fur had been cleaned enough to reveal more damage, raw skin on his belly, patches where the hair had worn off from dragging himself over ice and gravel. "How long do you think he was out there?" she asked. "At least 4 or 5 days, maybe more." Ruby felt her chest tighten. A week, alone, in that cold, bleeding, unable to run or even bark for help. And still, he'd kept moving. "What are the chances?" she asked. Dr. Harris looked at her. 20% maybe, 30 if we're lucky. "And what does it take?" "Time, medication, daily therapy. Surgery is off the table right now, too much swelling. But with enough care, he might regain partial use of his legs." "Might." "Yeah." She swallowed. "And the cost?" Harris hesitated. "Stabilization tonight. 2, maybe 3,000. Long-term care? You're looking at 15 to 20 grand. Ruby didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She didn't say she was retired. That she lived on a modest survivor's pension from the Department of Wildlife. That her bank account was under $1,000. She pulled her wallet out of her coat pocket, flipped open the credit card. The silver one, the one she never used. "Put it on here." Dr. Harris raised an eyebrow. "Ruby, you sure?" "No," she said softly. "But I'm doing it anyway." He didn't argue, just took the card and disappeared toward the front desk. When he was gone, Ruby stepped into the recovery room. The warmth inside was thick and dry, almost heavy. Bear was still, eyes half-lidded, but not asleep, When she crouched beside him, he turned his head. "You're a mess," she whispered. He blinked once. Ruby reached through the cage bars and rested her hand on his side. His ribs rose, slow and deliberate, under her touch. She hadn't touched anything living in weeks. Months, if she was honest. Bear didn't pull away. He didn't tremble. He just accepted it. The way her son used to accept bad news. The way Jake had always taken every disappointment, every hardship, with that same steady gaze. She remembered his voice now, clear as ever. "We help, Mom. That's the rule. If you see someone hurting, you help." He'd said it when they found a deer tangled in barbed wire near the edge of a hiking trail. Said it when they found a fox hit by a snowmobile. Said it when they saw a man curled up on a bench in Jackson, coatless in November. She'd heard it so many times it became a reflex. She hadn't realized how much she missed it until now. Bear shifted slightly, and Ruby saw his eyes. Those deep, unflinching amber eyes, locked onto hers. She leaned closer. "I don't know who broke you," she said, "but I'm not letting them win." His tail didn't move, but his breathing eased, just a little. She stayed beside him the rest of the night. At 7:20 a.m., a vet tech named Milo came in to check vitals. Ruby was still seated on the floor, stiff, exhausted, eyes red from not sleeping. "You look like hell," Milo said, not unkindly. "Been worse," she muttered. "You want coffee?" "Only if it's gasoline." Milo grinned, checked the IV bag, and gave Bear a gentle pat. "He's a tough one. Most dogs would have shut down by now." Ruby stood, joints cracking. "He didn't?" "No," Milo said. "He didn't." Later that morning, as they sedated Bear for wound cleaning, Ruby stepped outside to the parking lot. The snow had stopped, but the air was still sharp. Her truck sat there, frost-covered, evidence of last night's madness. She opened the passenger door. Blood stained the blanket. Her gloves, tossed carelessly into the footwell, were still wet and frozen. She picked them up and found something beneath them. The tag. It had come off Bear's collar when she lifted him. She held it in her palm. "Bear, if found, please keep him. He deserves better." No address, no request for return, just a resignation, a surrender. Her fingers clenched around the tag. Her jaw tightened. "No," she muttered. "You don't get to disappear, not after what he did to stay alive." Inside, Bear stirred in his sleep. His ears twitched, his nose moved, scenting something in the air. A nurse whispered to Milo, "He doesn't flinch at touch," she said. "That's not normal. Even the gentle ones, when they're hurt this bad, they still react." "He trusts her," Milo said. "Already." Ruby walked back in, holding the tag. As if on cue, Bear lifted his head. The IV still hung from his paw. His legs still didn't move. But his eyes found her. Not weak, not wounded. Present, alive. "I'm not done yet either," she said. And for the first time in 3 years, she meant it. The snow had started to melt by the 3rd week. Morning light broke softer through the clouds, and Bear, against every prognosis, was still alive. More than that, he was healing. The vet tech stopped saying, "if he survives," and started saying, "when he's stronger." His appetite had returned. His eyes stayed alert. And his tail, stiff and uncertain, had begun to wag. Slow at first, then with intent. Dr. Harris couldn't explain it. Ruby didn't need him to. She saw it in Bear's eyes each morning when she stepped into the recovery room. Saw it when he lifted his head. When he leaned into her touch. Bear wasn't just surviving. He was trying. They discharged him with 3 weeks of meds, a basic support harness, and strict instructions for daily passive therapy. Ruby brought him home in the back of her truck, layered in blankets. The drive from the clinic back to her cabin was silent, the good kind. Bear lay still but awake, watching the trees pass. Watching her, he didn't need noise to know he was safe. The cabin hadn't changed in years. The wood was worn, the roof patched more than once. But Ruby had cleared space in the living room, put down rubber mats, moved her late husband's recliner to make room for Bear's bedding and supplies. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, warm, quiet. He adjusted quickly, as if part of him remembered how to belong. On the 5th day home, she gave him his first real bath. The vet's wash had been functional, disinfectant, quick scrubs. But this was different. She wanted him clean. Wanted to wash away the last of the blood, the road salt, the stink of old suffering. Bear didn't fight the water. He let her work, patient and still, despite the warmth stinging his open sores. Ruby worked carefully, hands steady, fingers digging through matted fur with a softness she hadn't realized she still had. That's when she found it. At the base of his collar, stitched into the inside seam, was a thin, laminated pocket. She froze, slid one gloved finger in, pulled out a small bent square. It was a photo. A little girl, no more than 6, with a gap-toothed smile and wild brown hair in pigtails. She was hugging Bear, clean, younger, stronger. His tongue lolled out the side of his mouth. He looked happy, proud, whole. On the back, in clumsy crayon handwriting, Emma and Bear, best friends forever. Ruby sat back on her heels. The water ran down Bear's sides, pooling under the tub. But she barely noticed. The world narrowed to the photo in her hand. Someone had loved this dog, really loved him. A child, a daughter, Emma. Bear turned his head slightly, as if sensing the shift in her breath. "You had a girl," she whispered. "You were somebody's best friend." She dried him in silence. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, but full. Full of questions, of ghosts, of something that felt a lot like responsibility. She couldn't sleep that night. The photo sat on her nightstand. Bear slept on the floor, snoring lightly, legs twitching in dreams. By morning, she'd made a decision. She was going to find Emma. The microchip had given them a name before. No last name, no address. Just that heartbreaking note. He deserves better. But maybe there was more. She called the clinic first. "Milo," she said when the tech answered. "I need the microchip record again." "We already ran it." "Run it again. See if there's a full registration file, vet history, old addresses, anything." Milo hesitated. "Might be a privacy issue. Might be a dead girl's dog." Silence. "I'll see what I can do." 2 hours later, he called back. "Name on the chip is Richard Holston. Registered address is in Laramie. Numbers disconnected." "Anything else?" "Pet insurance. Lapsed. Last claim was filed 6 months. Igo. Said Bear was injured in a vehicle incident." That tracked. Ruby hung up, grabbed the photo, and stared at Bear. He looked back. "I don't know what happened to your girl," she said, "but we're gonna find her." What Ruby didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone had already found them. The story had leaked. Milo had taken a photo that first night. Ruby, kneeling next to Bear's cage, her hand on his side, eyes tired but unflinching. He posted it on the clinic's bulletin board online. No names, just the caption. "This dog dragged himself through a blizzard. This woman picked him up." The post got shared. The town of Rawlins picked it up. Then the local newspaper. Then Channel 4 News in Casper. By Wednesday, it hit the regional Facebook groups. "Wyoming woman rescues paralyzed dog in snowstorm." The photo went viral. Ruby didn't know. She didn't use Facebook. Barely used her flip phone. But she found out fast. That morning, a reporter showed up at her door. "Ms. Clark, I'm Jenna Taylor with the Wyoming Herald." Ruby squinted through the screen door. "Who?" I'd like to talk to you about Bear, about what you did. People are calling it heroic. I didn't do it to be heroic. I believe that, but others might want to hear it. She was about to close the door. Then she looked down at Bear. He was sitting up now, watching the reporter, calm, alert. For some reason, she didn't shut the door. The interview was short. The article ran the next day. By Friday, the cabin phone rang off the hook. People donated money, supplies, offered wheelchairs, therapy equipment. A retired vet from Cheyenne called and offered to help Bear walk again. And someone else saw the article. A woman, scrolling late at night in a Denver apartment. She paused on the headline. Read it once, then again. She zoomed in on the photo, on the dog, on the face she'd thought she'd never see again. She covered her mouth with both hands. Emma, she whispered. It's him. In her daughter's bedroom, the light was still on. Emma had fallen asleep coloring. In every drawing, the same shape appeared. 4 legs, 2 ears, 1 tail, and the same name. Bear. The past wasn't gone. It was on the front page, and it was coming home. The story had taken on a life of its own. By the end of the week, the headline about the paralyzed shepherd who survived a blizzard had been picked up statewide. Donations poured in from strangers. Ruby barely knew what to do with all of it. Every time the phone rang, it was someone offering help, or a kind word, or a question about Bear. But behind the noise, something deeper was stirring. Bear had begun to change. Each morning he seemed more alert, more insistent. He barked once, his first sound since the rescue, when Ruby picked up her keys. Not out of fear. It was as if he was trying to tell her not to leave. His body was still frail, but there was purpose in the way he lifted his head when the mail truck stopped, or how his eyes darted to the door whenever a car passed the driveway. He was waiting for something. Or someone. Ruby couldn't ignore it anymore. She took the photo of the little girl, Emma and Bear, best friends forever, and laid it on the table. Beneath it, the tag. If found, please keep him. He deserves better. R. The letter R. It had haunted her since the night she found him. She made coffee, opened her old laptop, and started searching. There were hundreds of Richards in Wyoming, but only one match connected to veterinary records. Richard Hulston, former owner of Hulston Auto and Repair, a small garage just outside Laramie. The address was closed now, marked property seized. A little more digging, and she found the rest. An article from a local newspaper dated 8 months earlier. Local mechanic injured in crash, family dog left paralyzed. She clicked it open. The photo showed a man in his 40s, grease-stained jacket, half smile that looked both kind and exhausted. Behind him, a German shepherd. Younger, stronger, whole. The article said he'd swerved to avoid a drunk driver and hit a guardrail. His dog had been in the truck bed. The dog was thrown out, spinal injuries severe. His insurance had lapsed. The vet bills piled up. The garage went bankrupt. His wife took their daughter and left for Denver. Ruby sat there for a long time, reading the same paragraph over and over. The line that gutted her. Mr. Hulston declined further treatment for the animal, saying he could no longer afford to watch him suffer. She leaned back, the chair creaking beneath her. The house was quiet, except for Bear's breathing near the wood stove. You weren't abandoned, she said softly. He lost everything. That night, she called Milo at the clinic again. I need a trace on the name Richard Hulston. I'll take any lead you've got. Ruby, you're not supposed to. Just do it. The next day, Milo called back. He's alive, but it's bad. Been staying at the city shelter off Reynolds Avenue. Works odd jobs, mostly cleaning or repairs. He's not doing great. Ruby stared out the window. The world outside was soft with fog. Bear lay near the fire, eyes half closed, but his ears twitched at the sound of her voice. He's here, she whispered. He's still here. That evening, she drove into town. The shelter sat between a closed laundromat and an abandoned diner. The air smelled like rust and rain. She found him sitting on the curb outside, drinking coffee from a paper cup. He looked older than his photo, beard overgrown, hands calloused, jacket torn. But his eyes were the same. Blue-grey, steady. Richard Holston? He looked up slowly. Yeah? I think I have something that belongs to you. He blinked. Mom, I don't. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the photo. Emma and Bear. His hand trembled when he took it. For a moment, he didn't breathe. Where did you get this? Highway 287, 3 weeks ago. He was crawling through the snow. Richard's coffee hit the ground. He stared at her, eyes wide, voice cracking. No, that can't be. I saw the photos online, but I thought it was someone else's dog. It's him, she said. Bear. He covered his face with both hands, shaking. I left him. God, I left him out there. I didn't think he'd make it. I thought I was sparing him. Ruby stayed silent. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't sound cruel. Richard spoke again, voice low. I was working under a truck when the jack slipped. It pinned him, crushed his spine. I panicked. I didn't have the money for surgery. My wife called me a murderer. She took Emma and left. I started drinking. I slept in the garage until they repossessed it. When I found out they'd put him down if I surrendered him, I drove him out to the hills, gave him food, a blanket, told him I was sorry. Then I walked away. Ruby's throat closed. The cold air stung her eyes. He crawled through a blizzard to find help, she said quietly. He didn't give up on you. Richard laughed once, broken. He should have. I don't deserve that kind of loyalty. He didn't crawl for what you deserved, she said. He crawled because he loved you. He wiped his eyes roughly. How is he? He's alive, still fighting. You should see him. He hesitated. Emma doesn't even know. She's in Denver with her mom. I send money when I can, not much. I set up that GoFundMe. I thought, maybe if someone found him, they'd keep him safe. Ruby took out the tag from her pocket. He deserves better. You wrote that. He nodded, tears finally falling. It was all I had left to give. When Ruby drove home that night, the sky was clear again. The stars were sharp as glass. Back at the cabin, Bear lifted his head when she opened the door. His ears perked. His tail brushed the mat. Ruby knelt beside him, voice trembling. I found him, Bear. He's alive. Bear leaned forward, pressing his forehead to her hand, and for the first time, she felt it, a sound deep in his chest. A whine, soft but certain. It wasn't pain. It was recognition. He remembered. The sky was washed with morning gold when the knock came. Ruby opened the door to find Lisa standing there, holding Emma's hand. The girl clutched a stuffed bear in one arm and a folded drawing in the other. Her eyes were wide, cautious, but hopeful. You must be Emma, Ruby said, kneeling. Emma nodded. Lisa offered a strained smile. She's been dreaming about this since she saw the article. We told her Bear went to a farm. She never believed us. Ruby stepped aside, and Emma walked in, silent and small. Bear was on his blanket by the fireplace. His ears perked before his head lifted. As soon as he saw her, he froze. Emma whispered his name. Bear. He tried to stand. The back legs didn't cooperate, but that didn't stop him. With trembling strength, he dragged himself across the floor. No whimper, no hesitation, just movement, urgency in every pull of his front legs. Emma dropped to her knees. When Bear reached her, he made a sound Ruby had never heard from him before, a deep, aching whine that quivered through his chest. It wasn't pain. It was something closer to mourning. He pressed his head into her lap. Emma sobbed and wrapped her arms around him. "I knew you weren't gone. I knew you didn't leave me." Bear whined again, licking her hands, her hair, her face, desperate to memorize every part of her. Lisa turned away, wiping her eyes. Ruby stood back, heart heavy, throat burning. It was beautiful, and it hurt like hell. Bear had never moved like that for her, never made that sound. She'd been the rescuer, the nurse, the shelter. But this was love forged before the wounds, a bond born of bedtime stories and backyard games and belly rubs beneath summer skies. Ruby offered tea, small talk, space. Emma spent an hour by Bear's side, feeding him bits of turkey, reading him her drawings, brushing his fur with slow, tender strokes. When they left, Bear watched the door long after it closed. That night, he didn't eat. Ruby noticed. The next day, he refused to settle. He barked at the door, paced in tight circles, scratched the floor near the threshold until his paws bled. He was waiting, watching, hoping. By midnight, Ruby found the back screen door nudged open. A trail of drag marks stretched into the snow. Bear was gone. She ran outside in her robe, flashlight trembling in her hand. "Bear!" Silence. She followed the tracks, breath hitching, boots crunching through fresh snow. Half a mile down the road, she found him collapsed in a ditch, exhausted, shivering. He didn't resist when she lifted him, didn't fight. But he didn't look at her either. Back at the cabin, she dried him off in silence. "You miss her," she said softly. "I know." Bear lay still, his breathing shallow, his eyes fixed on the door. That was the moment it hit her. She was not the destination. She had been the bridge. She remembered something Jake once told her years ago after they'd rescued a hawk with a broken wing. He'd been maybe 13. "We don't save things so they stay with us, Mom. We save them so they can fly again." Ruby sat down beside Bear, her hand resting on his side. "You love her," she whispered, "and you want to go home." Bear blinked, slow and heavy. "But what if I'm not ready to let you go?" His eyes didn't waver, and Ruby knew. The next morning, she called Lisa. "He needs her. He's not healing anymore, not really. He's just waiting." Lisa was quiet. "I don't know if we can take him. My lease doesn't allow pets." "Then break the lease." Ruby, we don't have the money. We're barely getting by." "I'll help. We'll figure it out. He needs her." There was a long pause on the line. "Emma hasn't stopped drawing him," Lisa said finally. "Every day, since he left." Ruby's voice cracked. "He hasn't stopped looking for her either." She packed Bear's things that afternoon, his blankets, meds, food. She laid them gently in the truck bed beside him. He watched her movements. He didn't seem scared. He seemed ready. The drive to Lisa's apartment felt longer than it should have. When they arrived, Emma was waiting at the curb. Her coat zipped up wrong, cheeks pink from the cold. Bear barked when he saw her, his whole body lit up, trembling with anticipation. Emma ran to the truck. Ruby opened the door. Bear tried to leap, legs still weak, but Emma caught him halfway, holding him like the world would end if she let go. Lisa stood nearby, watching. Her hand covered her mouth. Ruby cleared her throat. "I'll help with food, medicine, until you get on your feet. But he needs to be here. With her." Lisa's eyes filled. "Are you sure?" "No," Ruby said, voice trembling. "But I'm doing it anyway." Emma looked up, clutching Bear. "Can you still visit?" Ruby smiled, aching and soft. "If he'll let me." Bear turned his head. His eyes found Ruby's, and for a moment everything between them was said without words. Gratitude, goodbye, and love that didn't require possession. Ruby stepped back as Emma carried Bear inside. When the door closed, the silence returned. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt right. The night was too quiet. Ruby had felt it building all day, a pressure behind the ribs, a wrongness in the air. The wind carried no scent, no sound. Just that still, brittle kind of silence that made your bones feel hollow. Bear hadn't slept. He lay near the door, ears pricked, body tense. Every few minutes he shifted and let out a low growl. Not angry, just unsettled. By midnight he was pacing. Then came the sudden snap, a sound like urgency. Bear bolted upright and threw his body against the door. Ruby nearly dropped her tea. "Bear! What?" he barked, loud, desperate, his tail stiff, back legs scrambling for traction even as his front paws slammed into the door frame. He was trying to break through the screen. Something was wrong. Not here. Somewhere else. Ruby grabbed her coat, heart racing. Okay, I'm coming." Bear leapt down the porch steps like a dog half his age. She had no idea where he was going. She didn't have to. She followed him in the truck, headlights cutting through the black. Bear raced ahead on the shoulder, his body swaying, his breathing audible even from the cab. He didn't slow down, didn't look back. 15 minutes later, Ruby saw it. The lake. White Ridge Reservoir. Half frozen, half melting under the spring thaw. The ice shimmered like a cracked mirror under the moonlight. And out on that thin, groaning surface, a car, a dull grey sedan, front tires just beginning to break the crust. Ruby's heart dropped. The engine was still running. Exhaust puffed from the back. No one else in sight. She slammed the truck into park. "Richard," she whispered. Bear barked wildly, spinning in circles, pointing his muzzle at the lake. "No," she said. No. She didn't wait. She ran. The ice groaned beneath her boots. Every step sent a ripple of sound echoing out into the night. Wind whipped her hair back. She saw the driver slumped forward, motionless. The ice cracked again. "Richard!" she screamed. Still no movement. Behind her, Bear dragged himself forward. His wheels clattered uselessly against the uneven surface. He abandoned them and belly-crawled. Paw after paw, he made his way across slick, deadly terrain. Ruby reached the car. She banged on the window. Nothing. "Richard, open the door." Inside he stirred, groggy, confused, eyes bleary. He saw her, then Bear. Recognition hit like a jolt. He moved, fumbled for the handle, opened the door just as the ice beneath the front tires gave way with a deafening crack. Water rushed upward. The car tilted. Ruby grabbed his arm. "Get out! Now!" He resisted. No, this was supposed to be... Bear barked, savage and guttural. Then he lunged forward, grabbed Richard's sleeve in his teeth, and pulled. That broke something. Richard lunged. Together, Ruby and Bear dragged him out as the car sank nose first into the icy black. But now the ice under their feet was fracturing too. Ruby screamed as her foot plunged through, cold like knives slicing up her leg. Bear howled, scrambling. "Move!" she yelled. "Keep going!" They scrambled, inch by inch, until they found thicker ice. Bear collapsed. Richard was coughing violently, soaked to the skin, teeth chattering. Ruby dropped beside him, panting. "What were you thinking?" She gasped. "I couldn't. I thought you'd all be better off." He stammered. "You left your daughter, your dog. You tried to erase yourself." Tears spilled down his face. "I didn't deserve any of it. I broke everything." Bear dragged himself closer, pressed his muzzle into Richard's chest, and Richard sobbed. "I left you to die, and you came for me." Bear licked his face, "Because he never stopped loving you." Ruby said quietly, "Even after everything." The sound of sirens echoed from the distance. Someone must have seen the headlights on the ice. Rescue crews were coming. But they weren't needed anymore. The real rescue had already happened. Not from drowning, but from giving up. On themselves, on each other. Richard was alive. And Bear, crippled, scarred, loyal beyond reason, had saved him. Because that's what love does. Even when it's broken, even when it hurts, even when it means crawling across ice for someone who walked away. That night, back at the cabin, Bear slept beside Richard on the living room floor. Ruby watched them both. A man reborn, a dog relentless. She thought of Jake, of the way he used to say, "You gotta show up for the people you love even when it's hard." Bear had done that. Ruby just followed his lead. The hospital walls were sterile, but the room felt different this time. Softer somehow. Less like a place where endings happened, and more like a place where people started again. Richard sat upright in bed, pale but alert, a blanket pulled around his shoulders. The doctors had diagnosed mild hypothermia, cracked ribs, and a fractured wrist. But those injuries weren't the ones they were most concerned about. His psychiatric evaluation began the morning after the rescue. He didn't fight it, didn't deflect or joke or pretend he didn't need it. For once he sat still and let the professionals help. Dr. Benson, the attending therapist, was kind but firm. "You survived. That matters. Now let's talk about what you're going to do with that survival." Richard listened. Spoke when asked. Not everything, not yet, but enough. He said Emma's name for the first time in a session. He said Bear's name second. That same afternoon, the door opened. Emma stood in the hallway, holding a handmade card with crooked hearts drawn in crayon. Lisa behind her, hesitant. "Can I come in?" Emma asked. Richard blinked, then nodded. She crossed the room slowly and climbed onto the edge of the bed. "I missed you," she whispered. Richard's eyes filled. "I'm sorry." "I know." She handed him the card. On the front it said, "I'm glad you're not in the lake." That broke him. They cried together. Lisa stood back, watching a man she barely recognized begin to return. Back at Ruby's cabin, Bear was healing too. The morning after the rescue, he tried to stand. Ruby didn't expect it. She was making coffee when she heard a thump, turned to see Bear wobbling on all fours, tail wagging like a metronome of stubborn joy. She dropped to her knees. "You're walking." It wasn't perfect, it wasn't smooth, but he was doing it, unassisted, defiant, triumphant. The moment felt holy. She called Dr. Harris immediately. He arrived within the hour, stethoscope in hand, but mostly just to see it with his own eyes. When he saw Bear walk 5 steps toward him, he sank into a kitchen chair and rubbed his eyes. "I wasn't sure he ever would," he admitted. Ruby tilted her head. "You're the one who said he had a fighting chance." Dr. Harris chuckled. "I say that a lot more than I believe it." Bear nudged his hand gently, and then Dr. Harris told her the truth. "I waived almost all his costs, over $7,000 by now." Ruby's jaw dropped. "Why?" He looked down at his hands. "Because Bear saved me too." She didn't speak. "My wife died 2 years ago. Brain aneurysm. No warning. I stopped practicing full-time. I stopped doing anything full-time. I came in here that night just to help out. Wasn't supposed to be my shift." He looked at Bear. "When I saw him, when I touched him, something came back online. The part of me that remembered what it was like to keep something alive instead of watching it slip away." Ruby's eyes brimmed. "I didn't save him," he said. "He saved me." She didn't argue. She just nodded. That week, things began to shift. Richard was discharged into a structured outpatient program. Daily therapy, group meetings, supervised visits with Emma. Bear split his time between 2 homes, mornings with Ruby, afternoons with Emma, nights wherever he fell asleep first. It wasn't a perfect arrangement, but it worked. It gave everyone a sense of belonging without having to claim ownership. Emma fed him in the evenings, brushed his coat, talked to him about school and the dreams she had where he was flying. Ruby walked him in the mornings, slow laps around the yard, her hand on his back like an anchor. At the vet clinic, Dr. Harris added a bulletin board titled "Miracles in Motion." Bear's photo was the first pinned. Beneath it, paralyzed, rescued, recovered, loved. People started stopping in just to see the dog in the photo. One woman brought her teenage son with PTSD. Another dropped off a donation envelope with the note, "In honor of Bear, because I needed hope today." The GoFundMe passed $50,000. Ruby used a small portion to install a ramp on both her porch and Lisa's apartment. She donated the rest to animal shelters, to crisis hotlines, to the recovery center where Richard now volunteered twice a week. Healing wasn't neat. Richard still woke up some nights in a sweat. Ruby still talked to Jake out loud when she folded his old clothes. Emma still asked, "You won't leave again, right?" Even though her father hugged her tighter every time. But something had changed. They weren't alone anymore. One afternoon, Ruby stood on the porch with a cup of tea as Bear lay beside her, eyes half closed in the sun. "You're not just a dog," she whispered. "You're a thread. You pulled us all together, sewed us back up where we were fraying." Bear opened one eye, gave her a low grunt, and then sighed. Ruby smiled. Some wounds never fully close, but love finds the seams, and it holds. The snow had melted into green. White Ridge, once a frozen whisper of a town, now bloomed with the gentle noise of spring. Birdsong, bicycles, children chasing dogs down sidewalks lined with daffodils. A full year had passed since Bear dragged himself through a snowstorm into Ruby Clark's headlights. A year since a dog on the edge of death refused to give up, and took 3 lives with him back toward the light. At the edge of town, behind a white fence and under a homemade wooden sign that read, "Pet Respite Corner," Ruby unlocked the front door of her converted garage. It still smelled faintly of paint and pine disinfectant. The floors were soft laminate. Kennels lined one. Wall. Clean, quiet, airy. A reading nook sat in the corner, strewn with donated children's books about animals and loss and healing. The respite center wasn't big, but it was enough. Enough for 3 cats while their elderly owner recovered from surgery. Enough for a Labrador whose mum was starting chemo. Enough for one exhausted single mother to drop off her anxious beagle for 2 days of quiet so she could finally sleep. Ruby never called it a business. It wasn't. It was a haven. "Bear taught me this," she would tell anyone who asked, "that sometimes what people need most is to know someone's watching over the ones they love when they can't." Bear trotted beside her now. No wheels, no limp. A faint scar down his back was the only visible reminder of everything he'd endured. He paused at the kennel of an anxious terrier and laid down slowly, chin to floor, tail thumping. The terrier stopped pacing and inched closer to the bars. "Still working your magic," Ruby whispered. On Fridays, Bear would go home with Emma. By now, Lisa had moved into a little house near the school, closer to where Richard now worked. Not at the garage he once owned, but as an assistant at Dr. Harris's veterinary clinic. It suited him. He cleaned instruments, held paws during procedures, helped scared animals feel safe. He rarely spoke much, but when he did, the words mattered. Sometimes a client would recognize him from the news. Most didn't. He liked it that way. He saw Emma every day now, helped with homework, attended teacher conferences. He still went to therapy every Tuesday and group on Thursdays. Dr. Benson said recovery wasn't linear. Richard called it building muscle. Some days it ached. Some days it didn't. But he never stopped showing up. Bear's photo hung in the clinic lobby. A framed moment from the day he ran, full sprint, down the hill at the park, ears flying, wheelchair long forgotten. Caption: "Never count out the ones who crawl. They'll be the ones who run the farthest." Every Saturday, Bear spent the night with Ruby. He'd curl up at the foot of her bed, the same way he had when his spine was broken, when neither of them was sure who was saving whom. Sunday mornings, they'd walk to the corner cafe. Ruby ordered decaf. Bear got a strip of bacon from the cook out back. Neighbors waved. Children called his name. But not everyone called him Bear. To Margaret, he was still Miracle Dog. The old woman sat on Ruby's porch that Sunday, a photo album open on her lap. Bear rested his head on her slippered feet. "Jennifer's coming again next month," Margaret said, not looking up. "And we're FaceTiming every Thursday now." Ruby poured tea. "She sent me the video of you two singing Happy Birthday. I cried for half an hour." Margaret wiped her nose without apology. "She told me she didn't think I ever stopped loving her. I told her I didn't stop. I just stopped believing I deserved to. Try." Bear sighed against her leg. Margaret reached down, stroked his ear. "Your dog changed my life," she said softly. Ruby smiled. "Mine too." Later that night, Emma dropped by with Richard to return Bear. The dog barked at the sound of their car and ran to the gate, tail wagging so hard his whole back end swayed. Emma burst from the passenger seat, holding something behind her back. "For you," she said, thrusting a hand-painted sign into Ruby's chest. It read, "The place where hope sleeps. Bear's weekend home." Ruby knelt. "You painted this?" Emma nodded. "I think every dog should have more than one home, just like people. That way no one ever feels like they don't belong." Ruby hugged her. "You're wise beyond your years." Emma grinned. "I get it from Bear." Richard hung back, watching the two of them. When Ruby met his eyes, he gave her a quiet nod. She returned it. No words needed. That night, Bear curled beside her again. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn blew. Life went on. Ruby lay awake longer than usual, not because she was sad, but because, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't. Everything wasn't perfect, but it was true, and that was enough. In the dark, she reached down and let her fingers rest between Bear's shoulder blades. "You brought us back," she whispered. Bear thumped his tail once, and then they both slept. It started with a school project. Emma stood in front of her third-grade class, holding a slightly crumpled piece of notebook paper in both hands. Her pigtails were uneven that day. Her voice shook at first, then settled into the kind of quiet power only truth can lend. "My hero doesn't wear a cape," she began. "He wears fur and used to have wheels." Some kids giggled. Then she told them about the snowstorm, the blizzard, the dog crawling through the ice, legs broken, eyes still full of hope. She told them how Bear had been saved by a woman named Ruby, and how Bear saved other people in return, like her dad, who had once thought he wasn't worth saving at all. Emma paused halfway through, voice cracking as she recalled the first time she saw Bear again after 2 years. "He remembered me," she said. "Even though he'd been hurt and scared and left behind, he remembered." The classroom went silent. By the time she finished, 3 kids were crying openly. One boy, Tyler, who never spoke in front of class, raised his hand and whispered, "Can we meet him?" Emma smiled. "You already have." She turned and pointed to the back of the classroom, where Bear sat calmly beside Ruby. He wore a red vest that read, "Therapy Dog in Training," though no one doubted he'd already mastered the role. Bear tilted his head at the sea of children, then lay down with his head on his paws as if to say, "I'm not here for applause, just here." The teacher, Mrs. Langford, wiped her cheeks. "That," she whispered, "was the bravest presentation I've ever seen." That evening, Ruby returned home to find a letter wedged in the frame of her front door. No return address. The handwriting shaky. She unfolded it carefully, heart thudding. "Dear Ms. Clark, I don't know you, but I know Bear. Not in person. On the news, on the internet, in the comments of strangers who wrote, 'He gives me hope.' Last December, I sat on the edge of a bridge in Idaho. A lot of things had gone wrong. Too many. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry. I was just empty. And then I saw Bear's story on someone's shared post. I don't even know who shared it. I clicked by accident. I watched a dog who had every reason to give up, keep crawling. And something broke in me. The right way. I climbed down. I got help. I'm writing this from a recovery house. I just wanted you to know, because of Bear, I'm still here." A stranger who stayed. Ruby read it twice, then a third time. She folded it slowly, hands trembling. Then she opened the drawer where she kept the other letters. There were 8 now, from veterans, from teenagers, from mothers, from people across the country. Every single one told the same story in different words. I was lost. Then I saw Bear, and I found something worth staying for. At Dr. Harris's clinic, clients started asking if Bear would be visiting again. He began making rounds on Thursdays, greeting children in the waiting room, pressing his head gently into the hands of the elderly, letting his weight steady those who shook. Dr. Harris started calling him Chief Compassion Officer. Emma made laminated cards with Bear's face and handed them out wherever they went. Each one said, "Keep going. You never know who you're saving just by being here." And maybe that was Bear's real gift. Not just the resilience, not just the healing, but the presence. He stayed. When things got hard, when people got tired, when others walked away, Bear stayed. One Sunday morning, a local pastor invited Ruby and Bear to speak at the community center. The theme of the week's message, Unexpected Grace. Ruby hesitated, but Emma insisted. "You don't have to preach," she said. "Just tell the truth." So Ruby did. She stood in front of 80 people, Bear lying beside her, and said, "I didn't save this dog. I stopped for him, that's all. And stopping, it changed everything. Not just for him, for me, for Emma, for Richard, for Margaret. For people we'll never meet, but who wrote us from halfway across the country because a broken dog gave them a reason to keep going." There were tears, nods, a silence that felt sacred. Afterward, a woman approached Ruby outside the hall. She didn't say much, just hugged her, then knelt to kiss Bear's head. "You changed the meaning of my week," she whispered to him. He wagged once, slow and sure. That night, Ruby lit a candle on her windowsill, not for grief, but for gratitude. She watched Bear sleeping on the rug, his chest rising and falling in rhythm with a world he helped steady. Jake would have loved him, she thought, would have seen him the way she did, not as a miracle, but as a choice to believe, to fight, to stay. A choice that kept rippling outward, long after the snow melted, long after the wounds began to scar. Legacy, she thought, isn't about what we leave behind. It's what keeps moving forward in our name. And Bear was still moving, still healing, still saving lives. Just by staying. The Montana sky bruised into twilight. On the porch of a small cabin outside White Ridge, Ruby Clark sat in her worn rocking chair, a wool shawl over her shoulders, a mug of tea cooling between her palms. The breeze was quiet, almost reverent, brushing the edge of spring across her cheekbones. At her feet, Bear slept. Not deeply. Not the way he used to in those first nights, when exhaustion was survival and pain was a tide that never receded. Now his sleep was light, aware, like a soldier resting beside a campfire. One ear twitched every so often. His chest rose, steady as a tide. His eyes were half-lidded, but they flicked toward every creak on the porch, every shadow beyond the fence line. Still watching, still guarding. Ruby smiled, reached down, and ran her hand gently across his ears. He leaned into it without lifting his head, letting out a small breath that sounded like contentment, or memory, or both. The porch light flickered on with the sensor. Inside, the radio played soft beneath the window. The voice of the local host, Charlie Dunn, low and kind as always. "And tonight," he said, "we close our hour with a story you may have heard, but we think it bears repeating." Ruby chuckled at the pun. She wasn't the only one who still thought of him as more myth than mutt. Last winter, a paralyzed German shepherd named Bear was found dragging himself through a blizzard. If not for a woman named Ruby who stopped her truck, he wouldn't have survived. If not for Bear, she might not have either. Since then, Bear's story has helped raise thousands for animal therapy. He's visited over 50 schools. Dozens of letters have come in from people who said they chose to live because of him. Tonight, we honor a dog who couldn't walk, but still found his way back to every broken heart he'd ever touched. Ruby blinked fast, staring out into the dark. The fence line was barely visible now. The trees past it, silhouettes. Bear didn't move, but his eyes were open. She leaned down again, whispering against the crown of his head. "Still watching, huh?" His tail gave a faint thump. Ruby exhaled, the kind of exhale that only comes when you've been holding your breath for years and finally remember how to let go. Behind them, the radio faded into a soft instrumental. Beyond them, the world kept turning. Bear stirred, stretched one leg forward, and rested his head on Ruby's boot. The porch light clicked off, and the screen faded to black. Words appeared in white, as if whispered, "He didn't crawl for food, he crawled for love." What's your story with a loyal pet? Share your memories in the comments. Subscribe for more true stories that honor the bond between human and dog. Because here on the German Shepherd channel, we don't just tell stories, we remember them.